Hello everyone, my name is Ngor and I'm part of the Start Space team based here at State Library Victoria. Welcome to another edition of Inventors and Innovators. To begin, I would love to, on behalf of State Library Victoria, acknowledge the traditional owners of all the Victorian Aboriginal clans, and in this case for today's session, also extend that to the lands on which some of our speakers are dialing from, as well as cultural practices and knowledge systems of Aboriginal clans. We recognise that the state collections here in Victoria hold traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and around the country. And so we like to support communities to protect the integrity of that information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. We pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, who have handed down their systems of practice to each new generation for millennia. I'm part of the Start Space team, and just from the top end, just a little bit about our team. So we're here to focus and support very early stage founders. So there's a co-working element, there's events such as tonight, as well as a community. We run programs, festivals, as well as scholarships. So sit tight and look forward to an amazing conversation. Handing over now to Amy Carter-James.
Hello, thanks so much for the intro and the acknowledgement. I absolutely want to acknowledge that I'm on Wurundjeri Budja, which is also called the Margaret River region. It's a beautiful sunny day, hence the umbrella is up, which is very exciting. But yeah, I just want to also acknowledge that we can't have any form of environmental justice if we don't have social justice. So I want to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people here, and likewise wherever you are. Now, recently, a co-founder of mine, Sonia, she reminded me, well, she said this quote to me, which just resonated so deeply, which said, "Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. And on a quiet day, you can hear her breathing." That's by Arunji Roy, an Indian author. Why I say that is because I think so many of us can feel it. Like we can just imagine what a world would look like if we were post-carbon, you know, society was thriving, our nature was thriving, and you know that the nature crisis and the climate crisis is like just fading in the rearview window. And I personally believe we can get there, but the people that are going to build that bridge are the innovators and the people in the climate impact startup world. They're creating what we need right now to catapult our way, although okay, that's perhaps slightly optimistic, that we can pull our way through this crisis, navigate it, and we need their solutions right now more than ever. So I feel very honored and privileged to be able to host this and to highlight and shine a spotlight on both Steve and Prisca's both them as founders who are both very inspiring, as well as their innovations, their journeys, and the solutions that they're bringing. So first up, I'd like to introduce Steve from Airbridge. I had the pleasure of meeting Steve about a year ago or so, and I was just totally blown away by the potential impact Airbridge can have. Now, I'm not going to say too much because I will let Stephen say it in his own words. So I'll kick off the conversation in just a second with Stephen. But I also want to say a big welcome to Prisca from Baresop, who again is one of my Earth heroes and a real inspiration for me personally in her journey in eliminating plastics and stopping the shipping of water around the world, which is so needless so often. So thank you both for being here. I'm going to kick off with Stephen first. I would love you to tell us and share how you came to be here in Climate Startup Land.
Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this great conversation. I made a conscious decision about 4 years ago after I reflected I don't know if I saw a program on TV or something inspired me, but I just sort of had this wake up moment about living all of my life and taking what I needed and not really putting anything back. So I made a conscious decision that I really wanted to do that. And so I sat down and kind of thought about, what sector would that be best and how would I do that? Would it be a men's shed after I retired or what? And I sort of reflected, humanitarian, the environment. And I think at that same point, I decided, wow, this would be pretty cool if we all adopted this idea of putting something back at a time that suited you, that the planet would then have more hope and it would be full of all these people making their contribution, kind of igniting others. So it became like a bit of a social experiment for me, I think. Shortly after that, I took on a project as a corporate advisor in agriculture, sequestering carbon, and that's where I first began the realisation that putting it out there and choosing the environment as my sort of chosen sector, all of a sudden projects just started to come towards me. I'd finished that agricultural project and literally, I'd say 2 weeks after that, I overheard the word carbon in a coffee shop, and here I am today, and I'm now a climate startup junkie. I'm absolutely hooked.
Brilliant. So why don't you tell us why what you're building is so incredibly important, and what is the big problem that you're tackling?
Well, maybe I might answer that by asking myself a question first, which is, what if the pursuit of net zero wasn't actually an act of compliance, but an opportunity? So we're actually tackling CO2 at the source before it's emitted, before that CO2 enters our vulnerable atmosphere. We're locking the CO2 into a carbon solution. And then we're really, at that point, we're taking industry's biggest liability, CO2, and turning it into a global resource. So we're creating global commodities made from CO2. It's pretty important.
Yeah, I think I would just want to pause on that because I appreciate that not many people in the audience might be really au fait with carbon capture, utilization, carbon capture and storage, what that actually means. So I would say in layman's terms that what it is and what I find so incredibly exciting about Airbridge is that not only are you capturing this carbon at its source in emissions and you're stopping it going out into the atmosphere, you're then using this carbon and putting it into feedstock to create more products. So it's like there's this double positive effect that you have, both like stopping the emissions as well as stopping stopping additional emissions to create the products that you're creating. So Steve, why don't you just break it down a little bit, get a tiny bit techie, but still imagine that you're talking to someone who perhaps hasn't studied at the university, and sort of break it down. What does that mean? How do you do it? And what's the big impact?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I'll just let you know our marketing department's trying to turn us into geeky scientists at the moment. So happy to delve into some chemical formulas and molecular levels. But simply, our solution is a patented technology that takes the CO2 emissions before it enters the atmosphere, and that vessel locks the CO2 into what we call a carbon solution. We can then take that solution downstream and make a range of important global commodities. Now, those commodities we make today are fertilizers, cement and lime production, fuel additives, and calcium carbonates, which can be used for pharmaceutical, gloss paper, gloss paint. So these are global commodities that are used. So we actually make those products at a significantly reduced cost to current production, somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 45% cheaper than how they can be currently made today. And it also, really importantly, it's the beginning of carbon negative, or what we've been describing as carbon-fed supply chains. Now, the future carbon-fed, carbon-negative supply chains will be so critical for us to operate in a net zero economy. And those carbon-negative products hopefully will offset any emissions that are still being emitted from whatever source in those future years. We know today that those targets were well behind. The latest numbers that we saw is that by 2026, there's already a 50-50 chance that we're going to hit that 1.5 degree tipping point. So we need to accelerate this pathway, and the really unique aspect of Airbridge technology and what it does is it takes the emissions but also creates new products that would have otherwise emitted in their process. So we're also saying that we're not going to try and make these products ourselves. We're going to go to those emitters and say, here is a new process and a new way to make your products out of CO2, and it's cheaper, and you end up with a great story to tell your clients and customers being carbon negative. So it's really, really powerful.
Yeah, why don't we just use fertilizers as an example? You know, there's a global shortage of fertilizers. That's correct, isn't it? Because of the crisis in Ukraine. And what your tech is actually doing is to create fertilizers from these carbon emissions. So it's, yeah, like you're saying, it's like 35% cheaper to create it this way, and it's going to become more available. And like unfortunately, we've got a lot of emissions to cope with. So it's just such a great solution. If I don't feel like I've done that justice, but Steve,
you're really good. You've done your apprenticeship with our technology, which is great. I think, fertilizers at first, I was a little bit nervous about making fertilizers out of CO2 because we know fertilizers in the past have also contributed to some environmental damage by leaching into waterways, etc. But what we do know also is that fertilizers are crucial for sustainability and production of food. We see the current crisis around the world with supply chains, particularly the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. Russia's a big supplier of global fertilizer. We've got lesser developed countries that are emitting and can't grow enough food to feed their population. So if we can make fertilizers more available, reduce the cost, and strip the emissions that are being created out of the production, then we've got a game changer on our hands. I was recently in Norway at a conference, and I met the CEO of the Global International Fertilizer Association. They've got something like 400 companies under their association. And she was completely blown away with the concept of Airbridge technology and the application of fertilizers. And we're hoping that might lead to a conversation with United Nations next year and a project in Africa that's on our sort of radar for sort of the first quarter of next year. So it's actually really important commodity, fertilizer, because of all the reasons I just mentioned. There is one other element which I think is important, and I didn't realise this until I was in this space. Fertilizer production is made by the inputs are all mostly imported, and most countries import those inputs, and they're all derived from finite resources. So there's an end point of that production sometime into the future. So we need to change the inputs, and how cool that we can use CO2 as that new input to replace those current sort of processes.
Another thing that is so smart about Airbridge and that I love is that you're not talking about an enormous plant that needs to be, shipped in and cost billions to install this plant. It's potentially it is a small unit that can then be dropped in around the world to be able to create these mini economies. So could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the technology is a single vessel. Now, it really depends on how we capture the CO2. In our early applications, a lot of the discussion was around flue gas, so literally taking the CO2 as it was being emitted through the flue. The conversation now, which we're really excited about, is actually what they call a reticulated carbon dioxide receival pipeline, but basically CO2, compressed CO2 in a pipeline. Capturing CO2 is not a unique technology, and we know how to do it. It's what you do with the CO2 after that's really important. So there's that element, and if we take that CO2 as a liquid compressed CO2, which most industrial precincts are offering, then we simply just we can actually take that away from the emitter altogether and take that compressed CO2 off a pipeline, at any point, process it through our technology, and then we can take it downstream to a separate production facility to make those global commodities. So countries will be making their own commodities. There will be no more imports of products made from CO2, because for every ton of CO2 we capture, we make about 2.2 times in product. So we need to make sure that the markets are big that we're dealing with, so we can make a difference and capture significant amounts of CO2. So yeah, it's really exciting on that context. We're talking with industry, industrial clusters, one here in Western Australia that's really significant. But industrial clusters all around the world have a concentrated problem, and Airbridge would become the only participant in those clusters that uses the waste product of every other organisation as a primary input to our business model. And again, I think that's really cool as well.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we have to reimagine so much of our economy and so much of the way that we live. And that's just such a good example of taking waste and turning it into wealth. Is what we need to do everywhere. Yeah. I'm going to come back to you, Stephen. Absolutely. I'm really excited to go and jump over to Prisca, who is reimagining our bathrooms, which, is incredibly important. Prisca, before we jump into what Baresop is and where you're up to, why don't you tell us about your journey into this climate startup land that we found ourselves?
Right. Thanks, Emmy, for having me today. Before I start, I'd love to acknowledge the Yalukut Willam people of the Boon Wurrung, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Right. So my journey to where I am today in startup world really began, I would say, many, many years ago, a decade ago. So I come from an experience of studying other businesses before this. It's something that I love doing, but mainly because it enables me to actually be part of the change, really. So I love to champion the change and to own the narrative of whichever problem I'm trying to solve. And that really links into Baresop. So the journey to Baresop really began back in Australia from living in Asia for a while, and a moment whereby I was like, hey, like, what's my purpose? And even though I was already in the startup space, but in a small scale, and was already almost providing sustainable bags made from plastic to hotels in Asia, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I felt like I could do more, and really wondering what that is. And so a conversation about the plastic that's piling in the Pacific garbage patch, and really wondering why that is, and actually for my daughter, and really looking at can we own that narrative as well, and how do we do that? And my journey to finding a solution for the kitchen was actually quite easy for us as a household that's trying to own that narrative. But in the bathroom, there was a huge block for us. And again, going through that journey and trying to really link these blocks and why do they exist, really asking so many questions, and really quite shocked with what I was experiencing, and then having conversations as well with the community around me, with Monash University as well, where we were in the validator program, and really finding out that a lot of people, I would say 98%, want to do something, but they just don't know how, and why that was, because their lifestyle was demanding a lot of their time, that they don't have the space and time to actually find this solution. So they literally were looking for something that's very easy, like make it easy for me so I don't have to think too much or go out of my way to find a solution. Sorry, in short, that's really how we are here, how we exist.
Thank you so much. I always find when you speak, Prisca, that you're such a kindred spirit, because like me, you're just addicted to trying to create this change, trying to create positive changes that will have this ripple effect, that will have will affect everyone. And yeah, your entrepreneurial journey has led you to where you are now, and wow, we're glad you're here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Baresop is and about your products, and also the process in to create those products, because it really wasn't easy or simple. People think that it is easy to create a product, and in some respects it could be if you wanted to take the shortcuts, which are the Alibaba and there are plenty of shortcuts which you have not taken because of your true north. I'm rambling. Sorry. Over to you, Prisca. What is Baresop, and what is the process that you went through to get the beautiful products, one of which I've just used?
Thank you. Really interestingly enough, I think going into this journey with a lens of, and really that's how I live my life, impossible does not exist. So I think having that lens when I was going through this journey of, okay, so what's that solution look like? And really finding out that water is the problem. And so it was about how do we eliminate the water piece, right? Because the water piece was creating, obviously was making the packaging become, the packaging in plastic, as well as the carbon emission from the shipping of the water. And so I thought, okay, how are we going to do this? And I started to actually talk to chemists on how could we do this. And it was interesting to find how many chemists were telling me, no, it's not possible, Prisca, because it's going to be infected. It won't dry. Is it in a powder form? How does that going to look like? What kind of water are they going to use if you get if your customer is based in a region that the water is not clean or purified? That's not going to work. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. So to be honest, I just pushed on. I'm like, okay, I'm sure it is possible. And to be fair, I did a lot of research first before I started talking to these people. So I think that sort of enabled that to happen. So it wasn't an easy journey, but it was about 8 months to find someone who actually could use the foundation that we had created to make that happen. Yeah.
And the products that you've got at the moment, you've got 2 available. Do you want to tell us exactly what they are? So
right. So we have crystallized the liquid form of your body, hands, shampoo, conditioner. So we've just activated, we have crystallized only the active ingredients into a powder form. So it's a concentrate, and it comes in a sachet with a refillable bottle made from recycled waste from Australia. So it's all made here. And what we do is we offer it as a kit, and you just add water, tap water at home. Actually, our current innovation, you can actually add cold water. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be warm. And then you just literally buy the sachet. The sachet is compostable in your garden. So when we looked at this solution, it was how do we actually create something that doesn't leave any trace? So everything literally disappears. So we leave nothing for you to actually recycle, because we believe that you recycle when you have no other way to reuse the product that you have. So that's really how we have come into offering this solution. How is it a closed loop solution? How do we keep on innovating even easier solutions, really? Like, obviously, this is our base, but our journey or vision is to keep on innovating and even making that simpler and simpler and simpler. So
yeah, and I mean the hand wash, and it is like for those of you who haven't tried it, obviously you need to go out and buy some. Baresop.com, is that right? But meanwhile, let me just explain. It's like it's a foaming. It feels quite luxurious when you're using it, and it is all plant derived. Sorry, and it's like. And just to give like a shameless plug, sorry, because I'm a super fan. But so I've got 2 little girls, and they both get quite dry skin. They can't use the soap at the school because they just get all cracked and dry and sore. So they've got a little bottle of Baresop that they have, and it all cleared up. And it really is a no nasties. It's a beautiful product, which is great for kids and adults. So there you go. My plug is finished, but I just wanted to say how fantastic.
That's very true, and it's something we actually don't share a lot of, but that's actually similar to feedback that we are getting from our customers, that I had dry skin, I had issues with my skin, I had rashes, and I used your product, it was a gift, and I don't have that anymore. So we are not claiming that just because we are going through a testing process, but it's an organic feedback that we are getting, so it's pretty cool.
That is very cool. So literally, like, we've got them, these sachets compost, which is fantastic. Now, we haven't even talked about the whole water angle. So we're like, I don't know what the statistic is, but like you'll be able to tell me, Prisca, like out of a bottle of hand wash or shampoo, like what percentage is actually water?
I would say out of your normal hand wash, 99% is water, right?
There you go. And so we are needlessly shipping water around the world, which this is what I mean by reimagining, and we have to do this through all of society, and the way we consume is to reimagine how we can create products which are not harming, but actually bringing benefit. And the benefit, so not only are you trying to reduce the plastic waste, which is sort of such an inspiration from your daughter to the creation of Baresop, but you're also trying to help on the waterfront too. So you're trying to reduce emissions, create shipping water. But why don't you tell us about the other side of the water story?
Right. So the other piece of Baresop, which obviously I'm sure I didn't share, is the impact piece. So we exist to create impact for humanity and our planet. And part of that is, how do we build in our revenue so it's tied to impact, right? So how do we actually put our money our mouth where our money is really? So the way we are doing that is with the water that we are conserving from the shipping process, we are making that available to communities that actually are running out of clean water, which it's interesting when you read the news how that's spreading really quite quickly. And it's quite shocking because within the time that we have been in existence, the amount of news or events that are happening that are, drought or floods, whereby people can actually not drink the water from the lake that they used to get water from because it's all infected because of the floods, or from drought. So that's where we see ourselves creating change, and eventually actually we want to then shift that as well into sanitation and hygiene. But you obviously cannot there's no need for hygiene and sanitation if you have no water, because water is life, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, and I spent an awful lot of time in rural Africa and working actually exactly in access to safe drinking water and hygiene and sanitation. So you're certainly speaking my language, but it's the communities that have no voice that are suffering the most right now. And to be able to find a solution which can then help and support, and for instead of shipping water needlessly, actually a percentage of that goes towards providing water for communities who are suffering. And I think it's important to remember that it's not just the communities in the countries that don't cross our lips enough in Australia, but it's like even the likes of Jackson at the moment in Mississippi, that they do not have potable water coming out of their taps right now, and they don't even know when they will be able to. again, like we won't go into too much about climate justice because it could be a rabbit hole. We won't go too far down.
We started, Amy, because I will literally run that for hours and we'll be here for 2 years.
Yeah, we will resist the temptation and we'll go back to both of your journeys, which I'd love to go a little bit deeper on. So the next questions I had for both of you actually is like, right now at the moment, where are you up to? Where are you up to, like, as of today, and what are your sort of your next steps? So we know your bigger visions, but yeah. Steve, do you want to go first?
You go first.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So yeah, we've completed 2 pilot plant testing facilities here in Perth. We've been making our product. So we've validated every step up until now. And the last step that we have is to really now build this technology at what we call industrial scale. So it can be applied at industrial clusters. We now need to demonstrate that it works at scale. Fortunately, we think that risk is quite low for us in scaling up, because what's unique about our technology is that we don't use high pressure or high temperature. So they're really good attributes to take into an industrial cluster. So we're very confident of scaling up, but we're sort of making this conscious decision to stay stealth as we do this. We're going to just kind of keep under the radar. It's really hard because we've got such a great story to tell at the moment, but I feel like we need the credibility of making sure it does work at scale before we can really leverage and have conviction behind these conversations. So that's where we're at. In parallel with that, though, I love what you were saying, Prisca, and I did want to mention, like, we are a profit for purpose organisation, and so what I've got cooking in the background is we want to go one step further than what we're doing today, and we actually want to create carbon negative products that interface both with culture and keep public engaged. So we don't want to be off in the industrial precincts just saving the world and emissions and with fertilizers without connecting with communities and people. So we're going to find out ways to make products that are carbon negative that people can use, and that will be our way to send a message and retain power to the people, if you like, in that process. So we're going to call that like carbon fed innovation, and really re-educate this whole process around carbon. It's not a nasty molecule. It's actually a really important molecule, but it just needs to be repurposed into the right channels. So that'll take us about 6 months, I think, this next phase, but we're going really fast. I can't really go any faster than we're going at the moment. But really from there, we're out onto the global stage after that. So it's very exciting.
And actually, I asked my 6-year-old, I said, have you got any questions? And I'll convert it from 6-year-old language to perhaps more appropriate. But her kind of question was, what does success look like? What are you trying to do? What is success in your mind, Steve?
Look, I think it's a great question. To me, success is to see this technology deployed as rapidly as we can, and to see it working in I would say definitely lesser developed countries more than developed countries, because I feel like the social economic outcome of this technology has not been really known yet. Like, people just haven't cottoned on to the economic and financial benefits of actually producing products cheaper out of CO2, because you've got things like CO2 carbon credits and things like that come into play that make it so much more of an attractive opportunity. So yeah, I'd just love to see things like fertilizer prices coming down, oversupply, causing prices to go down. And so, yeah, just the global application of this in different jurisdictions. I've also connected to some, I don't know what's going on with 6 or 7-year-old girls lately. Lots of good conversations. I had a little girl in America who has climate anxiety, and we've been writing to each other.
Fantastic.
It's very cool. And I told her that she was going to, that she was inspiring me to really what success would be, but more so just like getting out of bed every day. And if anyone gets in the way, I was going to try and sort of think about her. And so we've got this really good connection.
Oh,
and
lovely.
what's happened as an outcome of that is she now believes that she can influence climate startup founders through her voice.
Oh,
And I
that's
just thought, wow, this is pretty good. This is like because you know what, they're the beneficiaries of the work that both Prisca and I are talking about.
Yeah.
It's not our generation, it's not even our children, it's their children's children that ultimately will be the beneficiaries. And I'm so excited to have connected with these young girls. And I'm going to stay connected because it's giving me a lot of
That's really
That's
cool.
wonderful. I just wanted to let you blow our minds too, Stephen, about give us some numbers of like the number of tons you reckon Airbridge could help to eliminate tons of carbon sort of being emitted. So blow our minds, because I know the numbers are incredible.
Yeah, so we've set a pretty ambitious target by 2030 that we'll be collecting 50 million tonnes of CO2 annually. There is no limit to how much we can't take or can take. It's more we need to ensure that we can make more products from CO2. And I think once we get going, the whole economy will open up to the benefits of, reusing carbon into supply chains and what that looks like. That 50 million per tonne of CO2 annually by 2030 will produce 2.5 times that in product. So we are talking about serious disruption of global supply chains. And I say disruption positively because we're not making the products. I'm teaching these producers to make their current products with a new process out of CO2. And we definitely would be a serious threat to anyone that decided to not embrace it. But I think that's pretty cool because it's like it's a forced hand to say, you really have to come down this path, otherwise you'll be left alone.
Brilliant. I love that analogy of a forced hand. It's like sometimes you do want to give people a forced shove in the right direction, don't you?
Yeah.
Prisca, why don't you tell us right now where you're at, and then maybe we can spill over into the audacious goals that you've got.
Right. So where we're at, so we launched the pilot with the hand wash to just test the market, obviously, because there was nothing like our concept. So we kind of had to test that. That went really well. And so we kind of proved demand and the concept. So we then increased the line to a body wash, which is doing well as well. So our next step now is scale. So we just launched into the US, and we are also now trying to bring more products into the market. So we'll soon be bringing shampoo, conditioner, and kids and other products into the elements of our offering. So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, and you got a pretty big goal. Which is
yes, absolutely. So our goal, our audacious North Star is really by 2035 we should have eliminated about 1 billion single-use plastic bottles from landfill, and within that the tons of carbon emission, not as Stephen's per hours, we're looking at 50,000 tons. And as well as 600,000 liters of water made accessible to communities that need it. And we hope we can surpass that. And if you look at past 2035, we hope it will be triple. So that's our audacious goal.
Fantastic. I want to just quickly zoom in on the business model for both of you, actually. And Prisca, maybe we can start with you. Are you doing B2C? Are you doing explain what you're doing now and your strategy for growth?
What we're doing now is we are obviously playing in the D2C space, which obviously is important through our site online, and then we are also B2B2C. So we are in your Woolies Online, Flora and Fauna, Nourish Life, and other distributors as well. And then we're also playing in the B2B, and that's where we are, working with hotels, We are talking to airlines as well and clinics to see how do we make it easy for them as well to create change with every wash.
Fantastic. And Steve, could you just break down your business model for us?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Well, we, as I said a couple of times today, we've made a conscious decision not to compete and make products. So our model will be a license and royalty model. And, one of the reasons we wanted to adopt that model is because that's the fastest way we can actually get our technology out globally. So we will license jurisdictions to use our technology. We'll manufacture our technology, which is a single vessel here in Western Australia. And we'll stay in control of that, the patented technology and all the attributes to that. And yeah, we'll roll that out very quickly. So we'll take a license fee and we'll also take royalty off production. The good part about that royalty payment, though, as we've just tested that through our financial model, is that the cost of production saving to these producers is significant. So we're only taking a fraction of that cost saving in the production costs saving. And so it's a win for the emitter, it's a win for the customer and the environment clearly and the planet. And it keeps us commercial so we can adopt, projects and other things that we hope to build on the back of this for communities that might be able to deepen either through our technology or just community-based social equity programs that we can develop from our technology. That's
great, thank you. Now I'm sitting here and I'm thoroughly enjoying listening to you both and feeling very inspired. I'm acutely aware there is probably a lot of other fellow founders and startups listening in, and so I'd really love to draw on some of your experiences. And I'm going to start off with a question around what would you have done differently? I always think that the book about how not to do it is always about this thick, and how to do it is about this, at least in my perspective, my experience. But what would you say, what are the key things that spring to mind, things that you wish you'd done differently, or things you wish you'd known back when you started? Let's just go back a small chapter. So when you started Baresop, and when you started and when you got involved in Airbridge. So either one of you, whoever feels moved, go first.
I think mine is really short. It's really like, I wish I trusted myself more, and I wish I didn't have this lens of, oh, someone may know it better than I do, which I think people do, but I wish I trusted myself and had the confidence to actually trust that I think that's it, actually, that I trusted myself more.
You trusted your intuition and yourself more.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And what about you, Steve?
Well, I think mine's very similar. I really relate to that. I feel like, I've always backed my calls with no regrets, and I feel like when I make a decision, I generally make it based on everything I know. But going back and reflecting, I feel I should have had more courage with my conviction, and I should have been more passionate and stood for what I believed was going to happen, but I didn't really know it was going to happen back then. And so, yeah, that's been a common element in this journey as a CEO of a startup. It's kind of, finding your voice, but also finding the courage to make, get the hurdles out of the way, and don't focus on any of those interruptions that basically try to distract you from what's really important. And as a startup, the things just in front of you are really important, and everything else is kind of secondary. So small, precise steps are really critical, particularly when you might not have enough money, or as you're trying to accelerate, that might incur risk. But yes, I agree with Prisca, very much your intuition, your knowing, and your courage.
Great answers from both of you. So the other side of the coin, what are you most proud of?
That was an interesting question, right? You can go ahead, Stephen. I'll go after.
Okay, well, I think mine's pretty easy, because my founder is a beautiful man, Terry Reid. He's about 78 years of age, and Terry has spent his whole life in the pursuit of excellence for science. When he invented this technology, he was trying to capture burnt diesel fuel and reuse it. So when he was a young man, he went to his dad and he asked him a question. His dad said to him, "Son, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution." And it literally was embedded in his DNA. So this is a man that's committed his whole life to the pursuit of science, and now we have this technology that's going to make a significant contribution to net zero. So it would definitely be, Terry's not a young man, he's in great health, but I feel like every step and everything we do is for Terry in acknowledgement of that work. We, as I said earlier, we recently went to Norway because we were nominated for a global award in innovation, and I was so excited to attend that conference on behalf of Terry, to really just show him that, you know, this is really the beginning of the journey, but the spoils of all of that really hard work and commitment that he made.
Thank you so much. That was really beautifully said, but also just to highlight, and to bring to light Terry, who Steve, you've been involved in for a couple of years now or more, but Terry's journey has been going on for how long?
I'd say over 30 years. This is a man that wakes up at 3 a.m. with an idea, and he'll get his notepad and he'll just go into the kitchen, make a cup of tea, and he'll write chemical formulas down. And I've seen him baffle the most brilliant minds in the country, scientists and material scientists, chemical engineers, and he'll educate them all. And yet he doesn't have a qualification after his name. He's a farmer, and I think it just comes back to this core of there is nothing we can't do. I think, Prisca, you said that earlier. You know, there's basically nothing that's not possible if you put your mind to it. And Terry just has that mindset with everything he does. I also love with Terry the way he describes molecules and reactions, and he treats them like a family. And so the way he gets CO2 to react with water and ammonia and things is by creating the environment for these molecules. And we've got patents in 15 countries around the world, and that's not an easy accomplishment when dealing with chemistry. So it just shows you it's something very unique, and you don't see it very often. So yeah, it's quite amazing.
Fantastic. And Prisca, have you thought of what you're most proud of yet?
Yes, I think it's very clear to me, actually. I didn't have to think about it, and that's really first of all, obviously, where we are from an idea that never existed before we did it, and obviously it's patented in Australia and the US because of the cost. But yeah, that's a different element to that. But to me, that's just a vessel that has brought me on this journey to what's most important to me and why I am on this journey. And so for me to be experiencing what I thought I'll be experiencing 10 years, 20 years from now, and I am already living that journey, and that's the impact piece. And for me to be actually giving back already to the community that's given me so much, and to contribute positively to my community, and to be able to actually show founders of color that they can actually achieve, that they have the capability to achieve whatever they want to achieve, regardless of where they come from or where they live, or who they are. So that's very important to me, and I feel like I'm already on that journey, and the various sort of things that I've been involved with because of Baresop. So it's really interesting how they say that success sometimes is not what you expect it to be, the way it comes. But whenever I look at that, I'm like, I feel so fulfilled that part, that I am living my dream. So yeah.
Oh, what a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. And I know you're both very humble. So I just want to force you to shout out about these two big awards. Like, Prisca, why don't you tell us about the award you picked up earlier this month?
Oh, come on, Amy.
Ah, go on. I would happily brag about it on behalf of Prisca. But
thank
we recently
you.
picked up a SBE, Australia Impact
our
Award.
recent award was the SBE Women to Watch Emerging Business Award. Super grateful.
That was fantastic. And then you were not just at a conference, Steve. You were a finalist. Perhaps you can just tell us what that award was.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it was the ONS, which is the offshore North Sea. So it's an energy conference in Norway held every 2 years. And I didn't realize how big this conference was. I mean, there was actually 63,000 people that attended. We had Elon Musk and President Zelensky dial in on Teams from the Ukraine on the first day. So if you sort of wanted to set the scene, it was definitely that first day. And so, we were chosen out of, I think, over 100 companies globally from, something like 15, 18 countries as a top 5 finalist. So it was a really, really proud moment, but it was also a really great opportunity for us to expose ourselves to the global energy companies of the world and trying to just tiptoe around and just, listen to what was going on. There was a lot of carbon storage going on, but not much talk around utilisation or reuse. So it was a really useful conference to get some pulse checks around Europe. There's a lot of good things happening, but a lot of concerns as well. Yeah.
So there's quite a few questions coming in, which is great. I'll start up at the top, which is from Simone. Thank you so much for sending your question. It is, what is one of the biggest challenges you face with your startups? E.g., is it communicating your story, getting the right support, etc.? So what are the biggest challenges? Either of you go for it.
Well, I think identifying your roadmap, and your roadmap will have different pathways on it. So you'll have a financial part of your roadmap, you'll have a strategy element, and, as a startup, it's like a blank sheet of paper. And so it can be a little bit daunting, and it's very easy to even leave some of those lanes out completely and get a fair way down the track and realize, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money to fund this next period. Money and startups, I would say, would be right up there as one of the biggest, inhibitors and hurdles for startups. So I think as much foresight as you can, take your time, and but that planning is really essential, and try and go as far as you can, be it 6 months or even a year, and then try and bring it right back. But make sure, I always talk about money as like fuel in the tank, but just making sure you've got enough fuel to get where you're going and know where you're going to refill, because if you run out, you might find yourself sort of going backwards. Yeah,
I want to just touch on that because we were recently described as pivot rich, which I take as a compliment. And that's one of the things when you're talking about roadmap is, yes, to create, you've got that blank piece of paper and to create it, but also to know where that true north is and to be able to react to the market and your understanding and your knowledge, and to have that confidence to be able to say, that 3 months I just spent on this, we're going to have to scrap it. We're going to have to go to have, and that's not easy. And I think that's, I just wanted to elaborate on your point, Stephen, there about creating those roadmap, but still having that flexibility. There's quite a few more questions. Prisca, do you want to add to that one, your biggest challenge?
I think you guys did capture that. I would say really it's just how do you manage churn in a way that you are still wanting to grow quickly, but how do you manage that because sometimes to grow quickly, you need to maybe hire this person or do this, but that means you're going to have to spend a lot of money. But if you don't spend that money, you're not going to grow quickly. So just balancing those elements, I think, is a challenge.
Not easy. Okay, so I've got a question from Kenny for you, Prisca. Can you please share your strategy to appeal beyond your first customers to a much broader market who might not necessarily is sustainably driven?
That's a really good question, Kenny. And why that is because that's actually what's driven our innovation piece. And that's what I love. And it's all about, how do you make me feel? That's what we always go back to. As a as a concept, how do we make you feel our customers? How do we amplify your experience? So you are using our concept, actually not because it's better for the planet per se, but because you love the experience of it and you love how it makes you feel when you use it, because that's what's going to make you come back. So that's really how we do that. It's really how are we focused on our customer experience? How are we empathetic to how they engage with our product, and how do we make it worthwhile for them, really? So
so the next question I've got here is from Tegan, which is, have you found getting funding difficult? When isn't getting funding difficult? Are investors considering triple bottom line, or does it really always come down to the financial ROI?
Stephen,
who wants to take this one?
Well, I don't mind. I think the landscape's changed so much with funding, and yes, I mean, first of all, in terms of ROI, it's important to know, what the commercial outcomes of the transaction is. But, and Amy, this is your world clearly, but it's so inspiring to see VCs, investors, all different categories of investors are willing to compromise what they would have previously done to ensure that they can help fund and get your startup going for the contribution that it will actually make. So really inspired on that front. I'm also thinking about all of the different types of structures that provide funding now. So it's not your traditional giving equity away so early necessarily. There's different vehicles like SAFEs and convertible notes, etc., which can be really appealing. And because most of the realities for these startups, we don't have income. You're pre-revenue, so it's like there's a risk, but the opportunity is so large, and we're going to sort of save something. So it's balancing all that back up. And I think the options available to us weren't available 2 years ago, 12 months ago. There's definitely a big appetite for climate startups globally. So you still have to navigate it. It's still not easy, but it's definitely much easier.
Yeah, I think, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think there is more and more capital flowing into this space, definitely. I think just globally speaking, this is a good place to be. There are still an awful lot of barriers. And I think sort of the thing that springs to mind first, it's still hell of a lot harder being female and getting funding, even though there is a move in the right direction. It's hard to get rid of those unconscious biases. And even I see it when I'm talking to funds and investors who think they're progressive, but actually they're still looking for that alpha male type of founder. So I won't go into this too much, but that is definitely a challenge. In terms of does a triple bottom line really matter? I think there's such a mixed bag. There are some awesome investors out there. We just need them to get deeper pockets, I think, and invest in more, have more availability to invest in more, because there's sort of impact and there's impact. Like there's some real true believers who are trying to create systems change, and there are some who are just giving it lip service, if I'm honest. Unless you want to add something to that, Prisca,
No,
I can keep going.
No, I think in conscious of time, I think we should keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Stephen, there's one for you from Simone. Are there many startups or organizations out there doing what you're doing, in brackets, yet, ? Capturing and repurposing carbon? So what's the carbon capture and utilization market looking like right now? Great question, by the way.
It's still pretty thin. We know in Australia particularly, both sides of government have only just really cottoned on to the utilisation element of carbon capture. So the market's very new here. There are definitely 2 or 3 other companies in Australia that would be, I would say, advanced because they've gone through their technology readiness level. They're now in commercial phase, so that's exciting. USA has got some really exciting companies. There's a company called 12 in the States that I love watching. There's sort of geeks from Harvard that are doing some really cool things. I was recently doing a pitch to a government body, and I was asked to list who our competitors were in utilisation space. And I said, I can't say that because I don't see them as competitors. I see them as colleagues, like we're all trying to save the planet here, but it's helpful if they're making different things, because then we can get more of the supply chain moving quicker. But yes, it's very immature in terms of storage. So utilisation is new, but I think when we see it start to roll out, it'll pick up a lot of pace, and we'll see a lot of commentary and new entrants into this market because of the economic output. So powerful.
Yeah, and for those of you who are not in this space, and you might hear about carbon capture utilization and want to switch off because you immediately think of storage after those two words, because there is not a lot of optimism in that space. So much money has been spent, but there's at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but there aren't many solutions that are actually viable at scale for just simply storing the carbon. In this space, like you said, Simone, in the really utilisation and repurposing.
Yeah,
that's
really important
area.
Yeah, because I recently heard a media outlet talk about a failed carbon capture project up at the west coast of WA at Gorgon, and it was actually a carbon capture storage program that failed, not the capture. So there's a lack of education all through there. And with storage, we know it probably has to be utilised now, because the solution is we need mass volumes of CO2 processed away from the atmosphere. But we use the term who's assuming the future liability of these decisions to store carbon in seabeds and other areas, and our oil and gas companies really the best custodians of those decisions when they're forcing oil up. So I'm a little critical of what's going on in the storage space, but I acknowledge that it needs to happen for us to have a chance of sort of getting this global temperature down. So I just wish we could get, so going back to Norway, they just announced the first European contract for storage in the North Sea between Yara Fertilizers, and I just went up to them and said, let's just put a tap on your pipeline and just take as much as we can. I could take all that fertilizer producers' emissions and give it back to them in fertilizer. So we'll watch this space, but really important. Yeah.
And Simone just said, thanks, Steve, for calling them colleagues, not competitors. That's the type of attitude I feel we need in this space. I can see you nodding too, Prisca. I think we're all in agreement. We're going to have to work together to get out of this mess, definitely. And we've got a question from Roberto. Thank you so much, Roberto. Hope you're doing well over there in Brisbane. He's asking, what are your current greatest challenges in relation to scaling up, Prisca, particularly in relation to distribution?
Good question, Roberto. I think I know our main challenge is because we are actually getting a lot of interest from distributors, but our challenge is how do we choose the right one? So I think that's the challenge. It's small because obviously the choice you make is going to affect how things are going to go forward. So I think that's the challenge, really.
And how are you tackling that challenge at the moment? Have you got any more insights?
Oh, okay, of course. So we actually just do really deep due diligence to make sure that they are the right partner for us, especially when it's other markets where we are not based, like India, Middle East, Hong Kong. How do we know that they are the right partner? Because we are not there to physically see what they're doing. And also, how do we actually create almost like a Bible that they can actually use to present the brand, because we are not in that market. So we don't have visibility of how they're doing that. So I think it's that, how do we keep brand equity in the other markets we are in that we actually are not physically in?
Brilliant. Oh, it's not easy at all. We got a great question from Tara for both of you. If there was one climate stroke environmental priority you could get across the line with government, what would it be?
I think that's for me. On what I would do is I would probably push, and I know probably people won't like me for this, but that's what I feel. I think they should push more for like tax for corporates who are not trying to do the right thing. Like I feel like corporates don't act until there's money involved. If you're taking something away when there's something that affects the bottom line, that's when they're going to take it seriously. So that's how I see it. So
Yep. Great. What about you, Steve?
I would adopt an independent body that distributes government funding to the right companies for the right reasons. So I'm kind of one of these simple, that the ABC program Utopia is kind of actually happens in real life when you sort of get in and try to knock on the doors and talk to governments about policy. And I just don't feel like they're really empowered enough to make the right decisions. So, keeping something independent, enabling the right investment into companies for the right reason, I think would accelerate things much faster.
Yeah. Thank you. So we've got a question from Samuel. Says thank you to both of you. Somewhat similar to Amy's previous question, but what is the best mistake you've made?
Prisca, do you want to go first?
I'm trying to think, what's the best mistake I've made? It really is funny how I'm leaning towards the same thing of not trusting myself more. Really, I'm just being very authentic with that. I wish, that's really, I think it's the sort of the ping that's going in my head, that you already know what you need to do. You don't need to actually ask 10 people to give you the same answer.
I think for me, it would be failing, tripping over, falling over. At the time, it hurts so much, but you learn so much. And my biggest learning times of my whole life have been almost periods of adversity or mistakes or times that are not the easiest. And so I think that's a great question. And yeah, definitely that's something I could relate to.
Yeah.
We've got only a couple of minutes left. So I want to just, the last question I've got is, what brings you both hope?
That's a really good question. I think what brings me hope, sorry, do you want to go first, Stephen?
No, go, Prisca, you're right.
Is that things are always changing. Things are never static, right? And things are always going in a circle. And when you have the bad, there'll be the good, always. So you can't have the good without the bad. You can't have the bad without the good. So even though we're in this situation now, to me, I feel like it means that's because change is coming. Because change is always coming. There's always change. So I think that's bringing hope.
I think
what about you, Steve?
I'm just going back to my, these young girls that I spoke about earlier. I think, it would be wrong that I would just sort of move away from that for hope, because it's resonated so deeply in my heart. And, if I sort of step up a generation to our children's age, I'm so inspired by the commitment that I see of young men and women in different fields that I have, and the work that they're doing on their personal journeys. I find that so inspiring, and it gives me so much hope that, we're only just starting to repair the damage that's been done in so many areas, but it feels pretty good to be passing that banner to that next generation, and then the future beneficiaries, the one after. I think we are going to make it. I think we can get there.
That's a great point to finish on. And I think, from my perspective, I think people like you guys definitely bring me hope. And I feel like I'm very privileged in getting a sneak peek on what's coming. in this space, and seeing the innovations that are coming to life, and the exceptional people behind them, and also the climate activists, the youth, and the young people coming through as such a source of hope. We're getting a lot of lovely messages. Tara said, thank you so much. Great session. And I also want to say thank you so much to both of you, Prisca and Stephen. We're really grateful for you joining us and sharing your journey, and wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
So much.
And to everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much.
Thank you.